Oh, hey, what's up? Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining me. Thought I'd talk about something a little different today. We've mainly been doing silly news, but I want to talk about something I really like. I'm just going to, shotgun stuff around, see what sticks. But I've had a song stuck in my head for days. Close, but not that song. That song. So that's right. Disney and Marvel have resurrected the 1990s X-Men cartoon, which is probably the most famous piece of X-Men media that I'm aware of. I mean, it came out at the perfect time. There was the relaunch of the comic that had the Jim Lee art. That's probably what most people think of when you say X-Men. And this was the cartoon that soon followed that's based on those designs. And honestly, if you know me, I'm pretty big in the comics, but I've never been a really big X-Men reader. Honestly, most that I've read has been from that initial Jim Lee run and some of the reprints in the 80s and 90s, the X-Men Classic series. I think to this day, that Jim Lee X-Men relaunch, that #1 issue, I think that's still the best-selling comic of all time, almost, well, over 30 years later. The cartoon was very popular as well. If you were born in the 80s or 90s even, you probably saw this cartoon. Like myself, this may be how you know the X-Men. This is pretty much how I got into the X-Men, the cartoon, the comics, and even more so the fighting games that came out. Capcom produced, which the Jim Lee comic came out, the cartoon followed, and then the video games followed, which featured the voice actors and designs from those cartoons. They had a whole tie-in going on. It worked. I mean, those designs are great. The cartoon was great, and the games are awesome. I mean, if you watch my gaming channel, I still play them. And they arguably launched the whole Marvel vs. Capcom franchise, which is huge and probably my favorite game franchise as well. But that's separate. If you want to learn about that, check out my gaming channel, DoctorBadvibes. But here, we're going to talk about the X-Men cartoon. So if you're not familiar with this cartoon, I'll just give you a brief rundown. So in 1992, Saban Entertainment collaborated with Graz Entertainment to produce an animated series. If the name rings a bell, Saban, that's who had Power Rangers and became their whole freaking billion-dollar company, I assume, from that. They've sold off Power Rangers a few times, I guess, but that's still going, so who knows how much money they made on that. Yeah, this show was created just to capitalize on the popularity of that comic book, the Jim Lee relaunch. There was a pilot episode that's totally different. That may be a separate video because that's its own thing. Finally, it got made. The show premiered on October 31st, 1992. I remember that. They made a big deal about it. It may have even aired prime time at night, is like a big debut. You know, it was for kids, but kind of not for kids, I guess. But it aired for a total of 5 seasons all the way through September of 1997. The show was international. It was a big hit. It gained a massive following. It was a Saturday morning cartoon, so lots of children, but a lot of adult viewers too. You know, I started, so what was it, 92? So I was 11, and I was 15 by the time it ended. So, I mean, you know, not quite an adult, but I stuck with it almost the whole time. Season 5, they changed animation studios. It looks like crap, so I didn't really watch season 5 until later, but I stuck through it for those first 4 seasons. So the show also had an amazing voice cast. I don't know if they've been in much beyond this show. I think they're all Canadian actors. Definitely in the video games. That was a huge hook on those. They managed to pull the voice actors over. So along with those familiar designs, they had familiar voices. You know, one of my favorites and most recognizable would be Wolverine.
I go where I wanna go. Out of the way, Gumbo.
I go where I want to go, bub.
Rate that in the comments. Tell me how good of a 90s Wolverine I do. No joke, he says that like freaking 10 times in that first episode. So as the show was known, X-Men, the animated series, it was a critical and commercial success. That's when Fox, the Fox network was still relatively new, jumping into the Saturday morning cartoon game, and that they really built that out. I'd say this show was a major factor in that. They had other things like The Tick and Eek the Cat, but this was this is probably one that pulled in more of teenage, young adult viewers, comic nerds. And along with that, so the show probably pulled in a lot of viewers that were not familiar with the comics. You know, I myself at the time was a comic book reader, but I never really stuck with the X-Men that much. To me, they're good, but I'd say out of all the comic series, the traditional American superhero comics. The X-Men are very hard to follow. I feel like it's probably easier now just because you can use Wikipedia to help, depending on how you read it. I do most of mine digitally now. This show pulled in a lot of non-comic book readers to become familiar with the X-Men. And even I myself, who was a comic book reader, I mainly read Spider-Man and some of the others, kind of read X-Men. It was really hard to get into. That's probably why I mainly read the classic X-Men reprints, because they kind of summarized and kept them all nice and neat. X-Men is a very convoluted and complicated series to get into, even to this day. I've jumped in and out. What's going on now is totally insane, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm trying to get caught up. If you are a fellow comic book reader, something I do recommend is the Marvel Unlimited subscription. It's basically a Netflix for comics. I'm not selling it. I just really like using it. It has pretty much every comic you'd want to read. It doesn't have every single Marvel comic made, but it's got most of them. So you could read, the first X-Men issue in the 60s all the way up to the present day and probably get most of them if you want to do that. But anyways, that's the comic book side. Again, this is probably most people's introduction to the X-Men, this cartoon. Very popular, lasted longer than it intended. It kept getting renewed. Even that 5th season where they really cheaped out on the animation, I'm going to keep harping on that because it looks so awful. I can't even watch it. The show was popular. It remained popular. I remember reruns being aired for the longest time. I mean, I haven't had cable TV in a while, but I remember at least here and there, like, oh, they're still showing X-Men on that channel. I think it may have even been some of the Fox own channels, maybe even Disney before they purchased Marvel. I can't remember, but it's been around and it's stayed around for a while. And I'm glad that Marvel, now they've finally settled their beef with Fox by buying Fox, they can care about the X-Men again. And the first thing they do is bring this cartoon back, which I think is a great idea. My initial reaction was like, oh, cool, they're bringing that back. I didn't think much of it. I had a mental note of what day it was going to debut. I wanted to make sure I saw it just out of nostalgia, but I was blown away. This show is so good. I mean, we're only 2 episodes in. I mean, it could still go off the rails or hopefully get better. The first 2 episodes, chef's kiss. It's very well animated. It looks way better than the 90s version while still pretty much maintaining those designs. They even brought back most of the voice actors. I mean, the only ones they didn't, they couldn't because time and age. Even Wolverine, it's the same guy. You can tell he can't quite do the voice the same, but hey, it's still him. He does a great job. I'm down. Despite being a continuation of a kid's cartoon, it's really leaning into the more adult aspects, not in that way, but I mean, more mature storytelling. It's not a toy commercial like a lot of cartoons were in the in the 80s and 90s. This one came out of the gate swinging. It definitely was saying, hey, this isn't a cutesy kids cartoon. Not out of like violence, but just out of the themes. I mean, if you're not familiar with X-Men, it's all about superheroes, but it's basically a civil rights cartoon. Like, everybody should be cool to each other. Don't mistreat people. So the X-Men are all mutants, and a lot of people don't like that. They don't like them. So you can see where those parallels go and how some of the stories go if you understand that. Generally, it just deals with fear of those characters. So I won't get too spoilery yet. I may as we go on, but I'll give a warning. If you want to check out the show spoiler-free, I do recommend that. So without getting into the spoilers, let's just talk about what this cartoon is, where it came from. So like I mentioned earlier, the show ended in 1997. This continuation of the show, it picks up in 97, hence the name, X-Men 97. This show was originally announced in November 2021. It was some Disney Plus event. Marvel kind of surprised everybody saying, hey, we're going to bring back X-Men, the animated series, and the title was known as X-Men 97. Of course, everyone that remembered the show is like, hell yeah. So where this show fits continuity-wise, we've got the whole multiverse thing now if you're into comics, so I don't know if it's going to tie into the movies or not, maybe. I'm just glad it's back. So they even brought back, like I said, they brought back the voice actors. They even brought back some of the original creative team. The head writer and showrunners back, and along with some of the other producers and directors from the original show. So they've got people that are familiar with it, so that you can tell the love is there. And like I mentioned before, the animation is still hand-drawn animation. It's just way better than it was. Saban notoriously cheaped out on that, so it may have looked pretty detailed for its time in the 90s. It was not very fluid, but that didn't stop us from liking it. So they're betting heavily on the nostalgia. I mentioned that, but I think you can go into this one. Again, we're just 2 episodes in. There's not a whole lot to take in storyline-wise yet. I guess maybe we can start with spoilers here. So if you haven't watched it yet, go do that. If you don't care or already saw it, let's just kind of summarize what happened, because I was very surprised and very intrigued. So just to rewind a little bit, let's start with the ending of the original series. The last episode is called Graduation Day. There's a mutant human relations summit. They're trying to, be peaceful, chill everybody out. But one of the series villains, Gyrick, appears and attacks Professor X, wrecks him, and to the left dying. But then his girlfriend, Lilandra, the Shi'ar Empress, remember how I said X-Men is very convoluted? Yeah. This is the simple version of the cartoon. Anyways, she shows up, says, hey, I have a cure. I can help him. I guess being a kid's show, they couldn't just totally kill him off. And she takes him to space to be cured. Although everybody still acts like he's gone, like they're like, yeah, he's dying. Magneto's about to take over the world or whatever he's doing in the last episode. And it's like, hey, Professor X is dying. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I won't take over the world because I like Professor X and I'm going to go show my respect. And then the show pretty much ends with the X-Men and Magneto hanging out beside the X Mansion and telling Xavier goodbye as he flies off to the Shi'ar homeworld. And that's how the series ended. And again, I keep bringing up, I didn't really watch season 5. It's every little piece I go back and watch, I'm just like, ugh. Do want to reiterate one more time. Season 5, if you go back to watch any X-Men, don't just do season 5 because it's the end. Because they changed animation studios. It looks terrible. It's so bad. They also did the Fantastic Four series from the 90s. I don't recall that one looking so bad, but maybe it did. I didn't watch that one as much, which ironically, I was more of a Fantastic Four comic book reader. Anyways, back to X-Men 97. Things pick up a year, storyline-wise, a year after Professor X left, or whatever the story's going to go. But he left, although they all keep treating it like he died. The X-Men, they continue their mission to defend mutants and humans, and they even go on to become legally sanctioned by the United Nations. And also in that time frame, Jean Grey has become pregnant, and support for mutants has grown. The episode starts out with the X-Men saving a new young mutant from the Friends of Humanity, FOH. They're kind of the hate group from the original series, and they're still hanging around. But now they have technology that seemingly has been taken from Sentinels. Those are the big robots that hunt mutants in the comics and the original show. Then they find out that, the two villains are still up to it. Gyrick and the creator, Trask, have been trying to keep the Sentinels going. So they save the young mutant from the Friends of Humanity. In the process, they make Cyclops look like a total badass, which has never happened in the movies or the cartoon. I guess in the comics, somewhat. I guess that's sort of like comic book readers are like, it's like, we promise he's cool. And everybody's like, no, he's not. But they finally prove that he's cool. The initial fight scene makes him look awesome and gives him a sense of humor. From there, we learn that Gyrick's in prison from attacking Professor X. Jean Grey reads his mind and realizes Trask is in a junkyard somewhere trying to rebuild all the Sentinels. So inside this junkyard, they find the current or maybe rebuilt Master Mold. He's where the Sentinels come from. He's basically an even bigger Sentinel. It's like the Queen Bee. They take that out, blow everything up. Sentinel threat seems to be gone. Nostalgia trip of an episode. Everything's cool. We reintroduced a lot of the characters. Rogue and Gambit are still together. Cyclops and Jean Grey are pregnant. Wolverine's still grumpy. Morph is back. That's actually something that's a little different. So it's still the same Morph from the 90s cartoon, but he resembles his late 90s, early 2000s look in the comics. It's kind of like, if you know the Chameleon from Spider-Man, it's just like almost like an alien, like featureless person. So he's with the team. Nice little nod in the intro, by the way. So in the cartoon, he was brainwashed by Mr. Sinister, and they kind of have a nod to that in the intro. So that will probably come up in the show too, I'm guessing. But anyways, the team's back together. It's got the full team. On top of the original team, we also have Bishop from the future. Again, X-Men's complicated. And they're all carrying on Professor X's dream. But then in the last scene of that episode, they realize somebody's in Professor X's office, and it's Magneto. And he has Professor Xavier's will, and he's like, yeah, he gave me everything. I'm in control now. I'm going to be the leader of the X-Men. So that's the big reveal, and everybody's shocked because Magneto's their arch nemesis. He's the big villain. How's that going to work? If you're familiar with 1980s X-Men comics, you probably know where the story is going. Additionally, I love that they use that horrific costume from the 80s in this show as well. I mean, I think it's a pretty clear sign plenty of references. That's where they're going. I mean, it's not going to follow the story beat by beat, but nice nod. I hope it follows the same idea. And that's where episode 2 begins. It turns out Magneto's trying to be good. He's trying to live up to Xavier's legacy. He's saving mutants and humans alike. Understandably, most of the team is not trusting him. Cyclops and Jean Grey, who initially hinted they were going to leave the team to, raise their kid. They're just like, we probably need to stay because the main villain is leading the team now. And then we have Rogue as probably the one sympathizer who has a little bit of history with Magneto. And the UN shows up, led by Valerie Cooper, that's leader of the UN in this show. And they arrive at the Institute to arrest Magneto for his past terrorism, which he's done a lot of bad stuff in the comics and the cartoon even. But he's like, hey, if I surrender and prove myself in a trial, will you all be cool? And they're like, yeah. So he surrenders peacefully, hoping to gain the trust of the X-Men and humanity. He goes to trial at United Nations. And the Friends of Humanity are like, hey, we have an idea. So they stage an assault. So their current leader, the Executioner, I'm not sure how you say that. I think they said Executioner in the show. It's Executioner. He's a comic character. He's got alien technology. He's basically like Punisher with alien guns and stuff. So he shows up in a very well animated fight scene. He takes on the X-Men. It's really cool. That's probably my favorite part of the show so far. He beats up Cyclops. They get into it, and then the baby's about to be born, so Cyclops has to leave, and Rogue takes him. So as they're protecting the UN during his trial, the Executioner tries to shoot Magneto, but ends up hitting Storm, and it's basically a magic bullet. It's built from the collars in the show that depower the mutants. So it's a concentrated blast that takes away Storm's powers, and it's kind of sad, like very well written and voice acted scene where she realizes her powers are gone and she totally like breaks down, and Magneto gets super pissed, flies everybody to the sky like he's going to just kill everybody. I'm not going to do it because of Professor Xavier, and saves all the good people, and they lock up all the bad people, basically. And from that, the UN's like, okay, he's cool. They grant him a pardon, and then they discuss the possibility of integrating the mutant nation Genosha. That's kind of like their own country in the Marvel universe. And at the same time, so Jean is in labor. This scene kind of made me laugh. Jean Grey's in the hospital, and she's like, this doctor won't deliver my baby. And he's like, no. He's like, their powers will freak out, blah, blah, blah. So they're arguing, and then they're like, hey, Rogue, can you just, if you touch him, can you just learn all of his medical knowledge? So yeah, Rogue touches the doctor and goes to medical school in like a second and starts telling everybody what to do. And they deliver the baby, and they give birth to a son named Nathan. So if you're familiar with the comics, should ring a bell. I won't go into that. I don't want to say stuff that hasn't happened in the show yet. Everybody's happy there, and then Beast is checking out Storm, and then they learn that blast from the Executioner has depowered her permanently as best he can see. So she's sad, feels like there's no meaning anymore, and she leaves the team, leaves a note behind. They're dealing with that. Also at the same time, we learn that Rogue and Magneto have some history, some romantic history. Somehow, I mean, I assume they're using the comic book logics, but we won't go into it yet. They haven't revealed. But Rogue, who throughout the original series and these first few episodes always expresses how she wants to feel the touch of another person. That's a problem. And it turns out that she can actually touch Magneto. So they kind of hold hands and embrace while Gambit is in the hallway looking pissed, heartbroken, and drops the Queen of Hearts symbolism. I love it. That's setting up some of the classic X-Men drama that ran, still runs in the comics, I believe. Then again, while this is going on, we're back to Jean and go, hey, we got the baby, and somebody knocks on the door, and Morph is like, oh, it's probably Storm, she's back, and they open it up, and it's another Jean Grey that kind of falls in, and then everybody's like, what? And the episode ends there. Again, this is pulled from another storyline from the 80s, which I do happen to know, so hopefully this is going the way I think it's going. I mean, they don't have to stick. That is one thing that drives me nuts about people that criticize some of the comic book stuff. It doesn't have to follow the storyline exactly, because if it did, what's the point? I mean, we could just read the comics. At the same time, it's a good story. If they do stick exactly to it, that's cool. It's its own thing. It doesn't have to be identical. It can share things. But so far, I've been very impressed. I've just kind of hopped on for a nostalgia ride, but it's a really damn good show so far. I mean, it's just 2 episodes in, and I had all this to say about it. Unfortunately, Disney knows better than Netflix than to drop all the episodes at once, so they're going to trickle them out 1 week at a time. So I can't just binge them and cancel the damn service. I'm looking at you freaking mouse, but that's cool. I definitely recommend watching it. There's a lot of nostalgia going around, like the Ghostbusters movie. I hope it's as good as this, but this has gotten me excited about the X-Men again. These are the X-Men I know, the ones I know best, I guess. And I hope they continue. I hope this is version they go with if they bring them into the movies, or better yet, if they kind of fix the comic books. They've been so convoluted. The comics have had ups and downs since the Jim Lee run, and some of them are just so convoluted I can't really get into them. I pick them up every now and then. I mean, there's probably stuff I've missed. I mean, if you're a big X-Men fan, tell me your favorite storylines. I'm familiar with the Chris Claremont stuff, not all of it. It's been a long time. And the Jim Lee run, I know there's good stuff I probably haven't read. So yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you like? I know Astonishing X-Men, best of the modern stuff ish. I don't know. It's probably 20 years old now, but that was really good. I do want to get caught up on the X-Men arc that I guess just ended. I tried to keep up with it, and it was just so out there, and I got distracted. I'll probably go back and pick that up. But these X-Men, X-Men 97, these are my X-Men. These are the ones I know. So let me know if they're your X-Men. Let me know what you thought of the show. I know not everybody's been positive about it. Everybody's allowed to like different things. So let me know. Let me know. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you waiting for more? I want more. And as I'm talking about the comics, I almost forgot, this is not the first time they've brought back the animated series. I know it may have been an online only comic. What were those called? I think it may have been called an Infinity comic. It was like a digital only. It may have been printed at some point, but I think it was called X-Men 97 or maybe X-Men 92. I don't remember which, but it was, these same characters that they kept going. I don't really remember much about it. It was okay. And I definitely know there was a later one. I think it was called X-Men 92. I think it tied into the current storylines somehow. Again, X-Men's so convoluted on the comic book side. If you want to get into X-Men, definitely have Wikipedia handy or some other Marvel wiki. There are plenty of good stories. Oh yeah, House of M. That's another good one. I really like that. That was like a whole Marvel Universe event, so you couldn't avoid that one if you were actively reading at the time. So anyways, that's my thoughts on the cartoon. It's good. I'm a comic book nerd. I'm in the comics. I'm in the cartoons. This is both, and I love it. So let me know your thoughts. See ya.